So we'll go ahead and get started. I know we'll probably have some more folks join in just a few minutes. So first of all, I want to thank you all for joining us, and thanks so much to Adam Dooley and Bobby Faithful for hosting this for us. This evening, you will be immersed in a complete sensory experience as you explore the potential interactions between food and beer. A few housekeeping notes for everyone. We just ask that you please keep your microphone on mute so that everyone can hear our host clearly throughout the call. You're welcome to have your video on or off, whichever you're more comfortable with. But please note that we will be recording this, so if you do not wish to be recorded, please just make sure that your camera is turned off. You may want to use the speaker view function, which is at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Please feel free to use the chat function to ask any questions you have for Adam or Bobby during the demo, and we will do our best to read them aloud and get to all of them. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our hosts. Bobby is the Brewing Ed Specialist at University of Richmond. Adam is based in Boulder, Colorado, and is the Executive Chef for the Brewers Association, as well as published author with his first cookbook, The Beer Pantry, which was released in 2018. I'll pass it over to them now so they can tell us a little bit more about themselves and get this night started.
Hey, thank you guys for all being here. I'm pretty excited. We've been lucky enough to get a lot of support from the Brewers Association. Adam is a essential member there, so although he's the executive chef, you're just overall a good guy. So I'm really happy you're here. So thank you guys for being here. So Adam, anything to say before I kind of tap into the essential ingredients?
Let's go right into it, but glad to be here and looking forward to seeing all of you over Zoom.
All right, I see a lot of familiar faces, so it's great to see you guys. So I just wanted to open up one thing overlooked with, people always go food and beer, but they don't really dive deeper into the essential ingredients. So beer itself, each ingredient and the way it's treated really affects a lot of the flavor. So I'm going to go through 4 main ones right now. So first off, when you're using malt grain, making a grain bill, many factors that change how it tastes. So people all the time think, ABV comes from hops or different things like that. But the more grain in the beer, the sweeter it's going to be. When I used to work at Dogfish Head, people would always come in because they have a 60-minute, a 90-minute, and a 120-minute, and they would come in and ask for the hoppiest beer we have. And people would always assume it would be the 120-minute because, yes, it had the largest quantity of hops in it, but because of the large grain bill to make it 18%, the beer was pretty sweet. It was like liquid candy, and the 60-minute was actually the most bitter flavor. So with that, there's a lot of components, but grain itself really affects many flavors and how sweet or how hard or different tastes depending on the water treatment. But, that's one of the main components factoring into how, some of the essential ingredients dive into there. I touched a little bit on hops there a second ago. So when I was talking about the 60-minute, 90-minute, and 120-minute, another thing overlooked is perceived bitterness. So depending on when you add the hops in the boil, so when you're making a beer, you can add them at different times. So if you wanted the beer to be super bitter and hoppy, you put them in right at the beginning, and you would get a lot of bitterness, a lot of like the West Coast style IPAs. So the whole premise of the 60-minute was they're continually hopping it for 60 minutes. 90-minute they would do for 90 minutes. So how long you put it, it's going to really affect the bitterness. On the end there, now New England style IPAs are really a popular trend. So if you're a fan of those, the main difference now, people literally will not add hops to the entire boil, wait till the very end, and it will add a lot of aroma. So the earlier you add the hops, the more bitter the beer will be. And the later you add them, it actually will focus on aroma. So people do a lot of bittering hops or aroma hops. So when you add the hops in the essential ingredients, really will affect the perceived bitterness. So back to it, if you're throwing all of them in the aroma at the end, the perceived bitterness is going to be very low because you didn't do any early additions to that boil. So touch on grain, touch on hops. Another overlooked essential ingredient that really impacts flavor is yeast. There's so many types of yeast, and A lot of people will use a yeast that doesn't really impact the beer a lot. Some people will do very strong yeast. So Belgian beers are well known for impacting the flavor of a beer. So if you're throwing in a Belgian yeast, they actually ferment at a higher temperature to, accent the subtle differences in the yeast that they're using. So when you are fermenting a Belgian ale, I've seen people go up to fermenting at 80 degrees, and that will give a really strong yeast flavor. So people that want that Belgian flavor will ferment at a higher temp. But if you're trying to make, just like an American pale ale, people ferment it pretty low, 65, and the lower temps down there. That way, you're not getting as much of the flavor out of the yeast. So sometimes people intentionally try to, affect the essential ingredient of yeast to really, not affect the beer. And a lot of times, people really want that yeast flavor to add a little extra component to their beer. I honestly think the last essential ingredient I was going to bring up was water. People always overlook water. All the time, homebrewers, different people want to talk about brewing. And one of the things, if you look at any production brewery, the water treatment, the way they manipulate the water really impacts the flavor. More than 92% of beer is water. So if you don't take care of that, your beer is never going to have the right flavor or impact you're really looking for. And a lot of times when people are trying to recreate styles around the world, they're really just trying to recreate the water properties of whatever region it originated. So water also plays a huge factor for the essential ingredients with flavor, food, beer, and just starting at the foundation. Without those things, it's hard to move on to the next step, which is pairing with food and other, there's a million things to pair, but what I'm getting at is it's hard enough to pair the flavors of the beer itself. So really getting it with other things is, pretty complex and complicated. So that's why when they called me and asked about doing this, I was like, you know what? I know someone that is amazing at this, Adam, and I was lucky enough that we're all kind of trapped inside right now to get you to help out with us. So I appreciate you helping out. But just talking about some of the essential ingredients, we talked about malt, water, yeast, hops. Are there any questions about some of the flavor impacts that you've been wondering that I could answer? I could talk forever about those 4 ingredients, but if anyone had any questions about their flavor impact in a beer, I'd be happy to take a quick question.
Hey, Bobby, actually, I had a question for my own curiosity. I've seen a lot of, and I don't know if this is a new trend or not, but I've seen a lot of dry hopped ales.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, I'm curious about that process, like where do the hops come in and how does that all work?
That's a great question. So we're talking about at the end of the boil, adding hops for aroma, right? So the later you add the hops, the more aroma you'll have, right? So now people really want a strong nose. Correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, but a majority of taste in beer is smell. So if you're able to get that aroma correct, you really can have a strong beer. So dry hopping, someone came up with the idea. The tricky part when you're brewing, the later you add the hops, like you can infect the beer, right? So people traditionally didn't do that, but some guy was like, when the beer was already done, so you brew the beer, you send it to the fermentation tank, it's fermenting. You let it go through generally the first 2 weeks or however it takes long to have the gravity go down. And you literally open up the top of the tank and you get a sanitized bag of hops and put them into the top of the tank. So the thought process was the later you add the hops, the more aroma you'll get. So someone just straight up put it in the tank, and you can use a process called crashing. So once you put it in the tank, it normally starts up for like another 2 days before it settles down again. When that happens, you crash the tank to 35 degrees. If you guys ever seen in your fridge, like Italian dressing, when it sits for a long time, things sink to the bottom. So when they crash it, they're able to get all these hops that they added very late through dry hopping to the bottom of the tank so they can actually dump it from the bottom. So by doing so, dry hopping is really just adding an extra punch to the aroma and flavor of the beer. And people started doing double dry hop beers and triple dry hopping beers. So locally, I worked over at Answer Mekong a long time. I remember when they asked us to triple dry hop things, we thought everyone was crazy. So you're taking off, adds 2 more days to the fermentation every time. So 6 days on your tanks. You're probably losing money, but it's very popular right now, and you can charge an extra $1 or $2 if you put dry hop on your beer. So dry hopping is very popular. In addition to people actually started at the end of the boil will use their heat exchanger, which is what is used to bring the wort from boiling down to the fermentation temp, and by doing so they'll actually use it to lower the temperature in the boil tank and throw hops in there as well. But you're risking infection. A lot of people have it down now, a lot of new techniques, but dry hopping is essentially just when the beer's done, throwing hops on top of it, letting it sit a little longer to build aroma.
Nice. That's awesome. So we actually had a couple more questions for you, Bobby, at least right now. So somebody was curious about different kinds of hops. They say, I always see those hyped up with various beers. Where do they all come from? See some names over and over again, Simcoe, Mosaic, and why are they more popular than others?
All right, so back to beer trends. We were actually talking about this last time Adam was here in Richmond. It's funny, no matter what, there's always popular beer trends and popular hops and things people desire, just like any other industry. And it's kind of cool to see the evolution. We were talking about when, Blue Moon was the big hit, and everyone was searching for those styles and flavors. Cascade, other things. So right now, all these hops that are really popular right now have the extremely fruity flavor. A lot of people that have been getting into craft beer weren't around for the West Coast style IPAs, things like that. Some people just like a really nice, fruity, aromatic IPA. So a lot of these hops that are desired are from the Southern Hemisphere, New Zealand, Australia, and they're actually really expensive and hard to get. People, have really lengthy contracts already for hops, and there's a lot of complicated things within hop growing and acquiring these things. Even if you go to a homebrew shop, you can get like some less popular hops right now for 1/4 the price of these desired ones. But the main things with the hops right now, if we're just talking about these popular trends hops right now, you can get them. You're normally purchasing them at a price where you're almost gonna break even. You're almost putting these up just for the ratings or ways to build your brand or portfolio. And it's really interesting. People have been trying to grow similar styles here in the US, and a lot of people are great. But originally everywhere was just Citra and Mosaic. So everywhere you go, Citra and Mosaic, and I still love Citra and Mosaic. If I just had to brew IPA here right now, I'd probably use Citra, Mosaic, Amarillo, and but if you can get some El Dorado, if you can get some Galaxy, if you can get some of these really hyped, and they're amazing tasting hops, they'll always get higher ratings. They'll always sell out, and people will always be chugging the beer hype train to get them. So it's a complicated thing, but I hope that kind of answered what you're hoping for. I was like, I haven't talked to anyone today. Did I answer that?
I think you're good. So is Citra Mosaic your favorite aroma hop to brew with?
Like if like for me, I I just know the properties as well. Almost every place I've worked at, or maybe they've had a Citra IPA as a staple. It's still easy to acquire here. If I do a blind taste test, I always favor Citra over most things. I think I've just been conditioned over the years, paid my bills.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I don't think we have any more questions right now for you, Bobby.
Awesome. So let me know later if anyone does. And I don't know, never mind. I'm gonna be quiet. Adam, how are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good.
All right, awesome. Thank you. What time is it there?
3:47.
All right.
So I am successfully on water at the moment, but I'll join you for a beer by the end here.
All right.
So kind of taking some of what Bobby was talking about there, and then moving it into food, or even before moving it into food, just moving it into talking about it. This is where a lot of things come into play. Is in the world of beer, we did a really good job of creating our own language, and bringing some people into that language makes it really confusing. Using the words of IPA or stout or sours or saison, and kind of growing globally around the world for pulling names, pulling styles, taking on all of these things. And so that made some things a little confusing. And then going into that, pairing it to food, right? So there's something really key that beer has that still beverages do not, and that's carbonation. So when you're looking at tasting food or you're looking at tasting beer, your sense of smell or your sense of aroma is connected to memories and stories. And that picks up scents and reminds your brain and triggers things of that. Your tongue or your palate is pretty limited in this game, right? You can taste sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and now fat and umami, which are the latest that kind of came into your taste bud scenarios there. Everything else is a combination of coming from aroma. So one of the things, like kind of jumping off of what Bobby was talking about here, where he had the Citra as being kind of a star hop for him, and there's memories and there's stories that connect to that. And if you heard him describe that hop in kind of detail, you would come up with a lot of these words and phrases that are very personal to him. That's kind of the jumping point there. Pairing is intensely personal. If you don't like it, that's fine. If I or if Bobby say, oh, do you taste the lemon or the citrus peel in here, and you don't, that's totally fine too. The biggest thing here is don't spend time trying to find lemon if you don't find it. Focus on what you're tasting, because if you keep trying to search for lemon and you can't find it, you're going to miss what you were tasting there. So to do that, one of the things that we kind of started to break down is like, okay, how do we take all of these beer styles we have and put them into smaller buckets for people that people can identify? So we decided on 6. For some reason, the number 6 came up, and went with crisp and clean, hoppy and bitter, rich and roasty, malty and sweet, fruity and spicy, sour, tart, and funky. And we feel that almost every beer style can kind of go into one of those 6 buckets. And that makes it a little easier for those people who are out there pairing recipes to, or wanting to pair or wanting to have beer or something, to kind of navigate it, as opposed to looking at over 140 classified styles between 3 different groups that classify them and have different names, and they even blowing it up to really the fact that the brewing industry is not necessarily regulated by the government as far as for what we call an IPA or what we call a Schwarzbier or what we call a Kolsch, versus wine. If you call it a Pinot Noir, it has to be a Pinot Noir. Well, beer, it doesn't have to be that. So simplifying it down can help a little bit. And then on vocabulary, it's really using what you know. This week, I would actually have been right now just about landing in DC this week, had things been going normally for us, and we would have had an event there later this week called Savor with almost 150 breweries and 300 different menu items. And this is kind of one of the fun parts that leads up to it, of how to kind of get with pairing and have some fun with it, is that it goes straight to it. Bobby was saying, bouncing off some of this stuff, bouncing around of, people who are doing double and triple dry hopping and adding all these hops in, and some people like that and some people don't. It all brings up stories and memories. And I think kind of one of my favorite ones to jump off on that is one of the chefs that we had tasting it several years ago. He wound up tasting a triple IPA as part of the menu process. And he just said, is it wrong that this makes me feel like when I got yelled at and I had to mow the lawn in the summer and it smells like a hot lawnmower blade with wet grass on it? And I was like, wait, that sounds really bad. And it's like, but for him, that was a good memory. So that's kind of where that goes back and forth to using that. And then playing around with food can really, really help activate something with carbonation. So going back to that really quick, beer has carbonation. when you taste, we just talked about the senses you pick up, aroma, you have those there. Carbonation actually triggers something different, and not to kind of go too much into this unless somebody really wants to know. In the back of your neck is something called the trigeminal nerve. And that is a unique thing that carbonation activates that still beverages do not. And that has a direct link to the brain that triggers memories. It also, coincidentally, is what triggers your reaction to capsaicin or heat, like hot peppers. Same nerve that triggers the reactions and can bring about quicker and sometimes a bit more powerful kind of reactions to some properties that are found in beer. So I don't know if anybody tried any of the recipes or if they're planning on trying them, but one of the things of the way to approach this is to taste the beer, taste a little bit of the food that you have with it, and then go back and taste the beer again. And kind of see and track what your reactions are to it. And that's a great way to kind of go into exploring these styles and see what you like and what you don't like and move around, because quite honestly, a lot of them go a lot better with food than just kind of sitting and having one. And a lot of food is made better by the beer as well.
So yeah, one of our members chimed in and said that she's really enjoying her fennel and corn salad.
Nice.
Yeah.
'Tis the season.
Yes.
We're getting there.
Yeah. We don't have any more questions right now, but I'm sort of curious if so you had mentioned, I think it was umami is one of those flavors. That's sort of mysterious to me. Can you talk a little bit more about what that is and sort of how it plays into stuff?
So umami is something that kind of came about in the late 70s and was registered through a lot of testing. And it basically is the reaction, breaking it down simply, of the swelling of the palate, right? So simply put, it's what salt can do. If you ever take salt and just put it straight on your tongue, you'll actually feel your tongue swell up. And it intensifies flavors, and it can have a calming reaction. It can have an exciting reaction, depending on where it lands kind of in your palate spectrum. But generally speaking, umami comes from enhancing flavors. Salt is a good way to do it. Think of like the crispy skin on the outside of a roast chicken and just picking up that skin and eating the skin on that. That can trigger umami reactions. Beer can actually trigger that as well too. Some robust stouts and porters can definitely have an umami reaction. Oysters are a good example as well too. So kind of naturally going into that, an oyster stout can lead into that, and so can some barrel-aged beers as well too, and kind of trigger a little bit of that reaction. And really, it just kind of makes you think, oh wow, you know, I really taste this chicken. I really taste the roastiness of the malt in this. I really taste, like, if you wanted to activate it with fennel, like for the person who's eating the fennel and corn salad, a little Parmesan cheese with the fennel kind of brings out the umami and really highlights the sweetness in the fennel.
Nice. So you provided quite a few recipes and pairings for us, which was really great. So can you sort of talk a little bit about why the pairings work with the recipes that you suggested?
Oh, sure, for sure. So in the crisp and clean category with the corn and the fennel salad, so really what we're looking at doing there is using the light grain notes in the beer to play off the freshness of the corn and the crispness of the fennel. We're looking for the greens to add a little bit of bitter, and then we're looking for the beer have the carbonation. Most of the beers in the crisp and clean category are going to have a higher carbonation. So if you're somebody who typically gravitates towards more refreshing beverages, crisp and clean is a good place to start, because the high carbonation level that's in there is really going to refresh your palate and kind of wipe those flavors off to get you ready for the next bite, and you can have a lot of light foods with it. So did the meatballs with the hoppy and bitter just because There's a little bit of fun to play with there, and we're kind of coming into tomato season, and to have a little bit of that where when you're starting to bring people into hoppy beverages, and working more with hops, the biggest thing you can do to help someone taste through a whole hop is coat their palate with a layer of fat. So what will happen there is that if you have a bite of the meatball or you have a bite of sourdough bread with butter on it first, when you take a sip of the beer, the hops are actually going to get pushed to the roof of your mouth and go in kind of through the nasal cavity and have a reaction up there before they actually hit the bitter sense, which is one of the senses your palate can pick up there. So you're going to have this brief hot second, like if you ever eat, everybody always thinks these are longer than they are, but it's like if you've ever eaten a really hot pepper, you have this like moment of pure flavor before pain, right? That's what that fat gets you, is that moment of pure hop aroma and flavor inside your mouth before it hits your palate. And then rich and roasty. So for this one, kind of wanted to go in a direction again of lighter, with the steak and with the tomatoes here, because everybody always puts these beers to chocolate, to desserts, to the finishes. And, not to say that that's wrong, because chocolate cake and stout is amazing. Add in ice cream and it's even more amazing. But you can really start to explore the flavors of these beers and learn that, stout and porter are not necessarily big beers. Just because they're dark and everybody kind of assumes that they're in that realm, a lot of them are lower in alcohol. A lot of them actually have a good amount of carbonation to be refreshing. And they do an amazing job of kind of scrubbing the fat from a rich cut of steak, like a ribeye. And then really just for fun with the dates, something, kind of wanted to do a range of technicality of recipes as well too. Bacon and goat cheese and dates and a sour and a gastrique on there. Really just to kind of play around with the idea of bringing fruit flavors in, bringing a little bit of sweetness in that is not necessarily tied to a dessert. That's one of the things where beer can go that a lot of other beverage categories can't, is that you can move up and down and left and right with these to find what you like. And if you have something that's like a rich and a roasty beer with a steak, you're going to have an entirely different flavor reaction than if you have that with a piece of chocolate cake.
Nice. So we had another question from somebody, says somebody who was a former wine, or as someone who was a wine drinker before she came to craft beer, do you think there are some foods that pair better with beer versus a wine, or is it merely a matter of personal preference?
Oh, that's a tough question. So I think that first and foremost, it is a personal preference. I think that in any situation where if somebody doesn't want to, or doesn't like beer, or doesn't like wine, or doesn't like that, that's giving you a kind of idea of not going into it. So having said that, there are things that beer can do that a lot of other beverages can't. One of them kind of comes into the alcohol level, right? Majority of beers that we're pairing with on a daily basis are, 8% alcohol or under. So when you do that, you're able to work in more styles of beers than if you were playing with wines or cocktails, which are higher ABV. So you can move around a little bit more styles and not have too much of alcohol in a pairing type situation. Another one is going back to that carbonation thing. The carbonation factor keeps your palate awake a lot longer. When we all first started doing beer and food, everybody was going out for these huge meals and just bigger. And for a while we were like, oh, you start with your lowest alcohol and you finish with your biggest, and you increase. And we killed everybody's palate. We did not do ourselves any favors for the growth of a lot of beer and food pairings with some of these epic dinners that just happened. And now we're at this place where I think one of the funnest things you have with beer is because of the carbonation, because of the use of hops, and because of the use of alcohol, you can go backwards and forwards. So you can have a stout or a porter with your steak, and you can have a Kolsch with berries and angel food cake. And because of the tie-in between carbonation to food to beer, you're still going to taste the gentle malt notes of that Kolsch in the dessert.
That was really helpful. Thank you. Do you have a favorite beer and food pairing that you like more than any other?
I don't actually. It kind of goes all over. And Bobby can attest to this. Like it's really about the time and the place of where you're at, what you're eating, and what you're having. You know, there's something to be said for having a beer where it was brewed. There's something to be said for having a dish at the restaurant or by the chef who created it. And then when you bring those together, it's a unique experience that you don't necessarily get when you just kind of are recreating a lot of things. So I'll think on that and get back to you. I'll have one before the end of this.
Okay. Hey, Bobby, we actually had a question a little bit earlier from somebody, and they were curious, how do you make a sour?
Oh, that's another great question. So back to, the main ingredients really changing. So when you're making, there's several ways to make a sour beer. There's, wild, spontaneous fermentation. Most people use either lactic acid or like a kettle. So the simplest way to put it, so we brew a wheat beer. We brew like a 4% wheat beer. We put it in the fermentation. We actually cover it and leave it in, I'm brain dead from not talking for days, but now redo. So you mash in, you leave the mash in the kettle for like a kettle sour, and you let it sit in there, and you track the pH. So most beers sit in a pH range, maybe 6 to 5. They vary depending on what style you're doing, but when you're making a sour, you let it actually get infected over a couple days, like 2 to 3 days, and you just keep taking readings of the pH of the mash and the wort inside. So once it gets down, below 3, the lower it gets, the more sour the beer tastes. So like generally, there's a lot of different ways to make sour beer. Most of the local breweries around here go kettle, seal it off, and then once you've infected the beer, you actually throw it in the boil just for 15 minutes up to 212 to kill off any harmful bacteria or things left in the beer, and then you have to chill it again and put it in the tank. So generally, that's the main way most local breweries do. If you go to Europe, and traditionally, a lot of these people have these amazing beers because they have this wild yeast, regionally located. So if we were at, in a Belgian countryside, we could, put our beer in Foeder open fermentation tank. So most tanks, modern, are closed. You could have open fermentation. Let the wild yeast come in. Some people use cool ships. So locally, Vale, Ardent, Triple Crossing, a couple of breweries here have cool ships and use them, but they'll brew the beer, put the wort up on their roof in these big vats that are flat with open air containers to have the wild yeast here actually, help start the fermentation process with these sour beers. And, and if you're just really trying to, cut the chase, like I'm home brewing and I just want my beer to be sour, if this is like you're asking, a lot of people will go and just buy some lactic acid. So you go brew your beer, you add lactic acid, and keep tracking it until it's the desired pH. So some people like super hard vinegary sours, or some people just like a subtle sour and want to add 15 pounds per barrel of fruit, have like a cool summer drink. So there's a lot of different flavor varieties you can get by making your sour beer, but generally those are the 3 ways I've worked making sour beer, and it's really about tracking the pH and getting it low enough where you're souring the beer in some capacity. Nice.
So we had a couple more questions come in, and some of them might be a little bit down your alley too, Adam. So one person asked, it seems like some of the flavored beers might be harder to pair with. What beer do you think is the most versatile with its pairings, and what is truly the hardest to find a good match with?
Okay, so hops are actually some of the most versatile to pair with. So if you're looking to kind of run the gamut from cheeses and charcuteries to salads to seafood to meat to poultry to vegetarian to vegan to dessert, Session IPA, pale ale IPAs are kind of an area to play with there, because they all have things that can go through, from pairing to lettuces, pairing to salmon, pairing to roast chicken, to roasted mushrooms, to eggplant, to vanilla ice cream, to carrot cake. And so those are probably some of the more versatile ones that can move around, that are, kind of what I would say in the top, 10 to 15 styles that you can kind of commonly find pretty easily across the US. Some of the harder ones are definitely some of the really, really sour beers, like that activate and just kind of pull like a Sour Patch Kid, and some of the really, really hopped beers, like the triple IPAs when they come out, or some of those really big ones that try to go up there, because you don't want to just say, okay, we've got this really beautiful creek here that's incredibly sour. Okay, we're just going to put it with vanilla ice cream, because then they'll taste the raspberries in it and we're done. You kind of want to move it around a little bit more, but that does make it a challenge, because it becomes something where you have to layer a lot more things into the dish.
Yeah. So one of our listeners tonight is vegetarian. And so she's curious, do you find it more difficult to pair vegetarian meals with beer, or is it pretty similar process? And any other suggestions of your favorite vegetarian recipes and pairings?
Sure. So vegetarian beer is it's actually a great way to go with, and you kind of think of like, okay, in a lot of vegetarian cuisine, to be honest, how a lot of vegetarian cookbooks are written, they're kind of similar to how these beer styles are listed out, right? Crisp and clean, you're going to go look and more towards a lot of kind of your brighter textured vegetarian dishes that have a lot of raw kind of produce in them, right? Whether that's a salad or an appetizer or a starter type recipe. Mushrooms are your rich and your roasty. Your mushrooms are your umami. That's kind of your meat in there. So same within that is also kind of along the lines of eggplant, parsnips, celery root, a lot of your big root vegetables, turnips, beets. Those are all in that kind of rich and roasty category. Malty and sweet plays really well with potatoes and squashes, whether they're fall squashes or summer squashes. Fruity and spicy, one of my all-time favorite pairings. I'm going to use this one. Done. I've got it. Asparagus and Saison. That is actually probably one of the most amazing pairings I've had. And it's so simple, but it's great. And then, kind of into that sour, tart, and funky, this is where it gets a little more complicated, right? Whether you're working vegetarian, vegan, or regular, just because those beers can run the gamut. Take a lot of like what Bobby was talking about. If you want to gently ease into sours, start with something that's a kettle sour. It's going to be a little bit lighter and easier on you before you go into some of these ones that are soured with a strain, like a Brettanomyces strain. That's going to be kind of a step up, and then a step up from there is going into something that has been spontaneously fermented and barrel aged for a while. So kind of ease into it, but then work it around a little bit of food. I'm going to kind of go back to the root vegetable world with a lot of the sours. Again, going to like beets. You can even kind of go with something like rutabagas, leeks, instead of onions, because they're a little bit softer, are really kind of good in the sour range as well too. So a lot of fun can be had there. I'll send it to somebody for later, but a couple times, because that is also a big stigma we got into with meat, is like, right, the main course was like this giant, like half of a cow on a platter with a giant stein of barrel-aged stout. Vegetarian food actually can have some really amazing pairings with beer and some really pairing moments. And we've done a couple really, a lot of fun vegetarian menus. So I'll send them to you. You can share with people that were on here. I'm just kind of getting some ideas for them.
That'd be great. Thank you. So this one sounds like it's for you, Bobby. So somebody asked, please describe the differences in IPAs, or Adam, if you want to jump in too. It said New England, West Coast, American. What are the differences, and are there other IPAs?
Yeah, so there's a ton of IPAs now. Back to last time when Adam was here, almost I feel like every majority of the trends in beer have always been a variation on how to treat your beer with hops, right? So people, West Coast style. There's dry hopped, which we talked about a little bit. A while back, wet hopped. Wet hop was referring to using whole cone hops. So generally, most breweries use pellet hops. It's way easier to use, treat, manage. But they would use, whole cone hops to use, run the beer through to build out aroma that way with, the whole cone. You also have Belgian style IPAs. We were talking about Belgian yeast earlier. So, are we allowed to curse on here? But no, I was going to say there's a popular beer out of Maryland that's nationally distributed. It's a very popular Belgian IPA. And the name has a curse word in it. That's why I brought that up. But yeah, so they actually brew IPA, and the yeast we're talking about, they get the flavor out to make it a Belgian IPA. Black IPAs were popular a while back. So some people would use dark malt to make it dark, but BSG is a big distributor for, beverage ingredients, and they actually have, you can actually just pour some stuff in your beer. Your IPA is black then. When we're talking about the different names in IPAs, the question I get the most is session IPA, IPA, double IPA, triple IPA, quadruple IPA. The term is varied and moved, but session IPA generally, so regular IPA generally, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, because his organization actually keeps track of this, but regular IPA typically from 5 and under 8. Below 5, session IPA. Double IPA from 8 to 10. And when I say these numbers, I mean alcohol, ABV, alcohol beverage volume, so how much, ABV it is. So there's a lot of different factors that vary these ones, but when you see session IPA, IPA, double IPA, triple IPA, generally one of the distinguishing things with that is the ABV on that. And here locally, we actually have a great example. Normally when we talk about this in class, the Vail does a good job with this. They found a good way to brand it. So all their IPAs that'll do the same grain bill, same ingredients for all these same beers, but they go by cars and colors for hops. So the colors are the type of hops, and the cars are how they distinguish what type of IPA is. So their session IPA, because it's the lowest ABV, they call it'll be like Green Miata, and then the next one up is it'll be Green Ferrari. That's all the normal IPAs. Then they move up the triples Bugatti, and they use just different names to distinguish. And the customers actually have been conditioned and don't realize they always use the same colors for the same hops. So anytime they use Galaxy, they name it White Miata. So customers don't know that they like Galaxy all the time, but they're like, if they see the name white in it, they know they like that type of hop. And same Citrus green, Eldorado's red, and then they know the car names, so they actually know if they like sessions, IPAs, double or triple. And it's kind of funny because all these people are distinguishing different hop varieties and the differences in them. And I always think that's the easy way locally to, remember the difference between session IPA, IPA, double IPA, and triple IPA. There's a lot of different, there's wood treated IPAs. So people will do like oak treated. A lot of times putting IPAs or anything in wood, it will mellow out, give little subtleties. I remember at Dogfish 90 Minute, we blend with the English Strong Ale and put an oak, and it was like drinking a cloud. It had this very soft mouth feel, and really changes the variety. So I could go off for a long time on IPAs, but as far as what we talked today, we have dry hopped IPAs, wet hopped IPAs, black IPAs, session IPAs, regular IPA, double IPA, triple IPA, Belgian IPA. You could just do regular, there's a lot of varieties now. New England IPA, like I was saying earlier, that one's very popular now. It's where they do really late hop additions. Normally have a pretty normal grain bill, and you're going to add a ton in the very end to build out the aroma, and then you're going to add a ton dry hopping it, and you're just going to keep doing everything to impact the aroma. So right now, their IPA obviously has been a very popular trend for a long time now. It's kept me working for the last, over the last decade, and probably keep us all going here. So there's a lot of styles, and I'm sure you deal with this a lot, Adam. People just make things up too.
Yeah, we've got a category now called experimental IPA and also emerging IPA. So those just kind of blow the roof off of that there. And I think it's definitely interesting to see all of the innovation that's happening, but it gets really confusing because you look at, okay, a lot of times one of the most commonly asked questions is like, okay, well, what IPA is less hoppy? Well, there's not a style guideline for that. That is actually going to be coming like per brewery, right? Typically speaking, if you find an IPA is too hoppy, drop down a little bit to a pale ale. And then it's funny, one of the emerging styles that people are really talking about in IPAs is a single hop IPA. And, you go back to thinking about how history repeats itself. One of the beer that created this within Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is a single hop beer. So going in and trying that and then really getting to see what all these people are innovating with and saying, oh, this is a single hop IPA. It's like, yeah, that's, we're kind of coming back around to it. And then it really gets even more confusing with bringing in a hazy IPA because hazy IPAs aren't bitter. And so that gets a little bit more confusing on there. And then how they get their haze is a myriad of ways, whether it's through yeast or through using a higher malt bill or higher weight of grain to water ratio in the recipe, to using flaked oats, to a whole different way of things. The biggest thing I can say with a hazy IPA is that that's one that if you're going into something that is truly a hazy IPA, you're going to want to kind of stick closer to home to try those. Those have a very short shelf life where the hop aroma will start to fade really fast.
Thank you. I was also curious about hazy IPA, so thanks for talking about that. So somebody had a question about sort of imports and like the international beer scene. So they're curious, what international beer markets seem the most exciting to you right now? And like, what would you gravitate towards if you were looking for imports?
Can you take this one, Adam? You deal a lot.
Sure. Okay. So a couple really fun examples. For anybody who is a huge foodie, in the last 5 years, the craft beer scene and the small brewing scene in Paris has been exploding. About 7 or 8 years ago, there were less than 5 breweries within Paris and the outside kind of ring of Paris, and now there are more than 40. And they have some insanely talented brewers that are doing some really good beer there. Another fun one to go to, Berlin, because they're not part of kind of the Bavarian part of Germany. They are not kind of paying attention to this really old law that happens there, and they've got some really innovative brewers happening there. Jumping over the other way, South Korea, believe it or not, has an absolutely amazing beer scene and has some really talented things happening with it. And then going even further than that, Australia as well has quite an emerging craft beer scene there.
Thank you. So we had another question. Is there one brewery that either one of you is most excited to visit when things open back up and get back to normal, whether it's ambiance or maybe a favorite beer that you have?
Where are you thinking? You got anything?
I don't know. I'm thinking I'm just going to come out to Richmond and have a beer with you.
Yeah. No, we our beer scene's doing well here. When everything opens back up, I honestly, I really want. I know you can go out and do things. I've been, staying at home pretty much, and I've always loved here locally. Triple Crossing does some amazing beers. Tony at Final Gravity in Lakeside will probably be my first visit. He's always pumping out some crazy stuff and great quality. And that's probably the first place I'm gonna go. Nice patio. Hopefully it'll be nice out this summer. So probably go have a nice back to people doing traditional styles. He's been doing a bunch of great pilsners and things like that. So now I really look forward to those, especially summertime. So probably my first spot.
I'd say for me here locally, I think I owe my first beer probably here in Boulder to a brewery called Upslope. Small little brewery. They also helped me out in a bind when I needed a tri-clamp valve. So during the shutdown of actually getting a few pieces of things you need every now and then. So having a beer with them and kind of going back over some stories would be a good time.
So we had one more question. Somebody is curious, what is a Pilsner?
Adam, you want to take this one?
Sure. So Pilsner is, this falls into the crisp and clean category. This is also going to be a beer that we would kind of refer to as having a noble hop into it, or something that's going to be hopped with hops that are kind of grown over in the Bavarian region. It's going to be very light in malt with kind of a clear golden color. It's going to have an herbal hop kind of characteristic to it more than a floral or citrus. And it's going to have a very high level of carbonation to it that will kind of do well for impairing, scrubbing the palate. And generally speaking, it's going to be a little bit lower than alcohol. Traditionally speaking, around 5%. Some of them have gone a little bit higher. And I think on an anecdotal note, Pilsner is the beer that that's the shift beer. That's what a brewer has at the end of their shift before they move to an IPA. That's what you have at the end of a restaurant. That's like your first beer after the shift.
So we'll, if we have any more questions, people can go ahead and put them in the chat. But I think that we do have more. So what's the difference between stout and brown ale, and which kind of beer do more women drink?
So I can talk about a little on that. So I remember one of the biggest misconceptions when I used to work the floor at a brewery in town, Mekong Answer, people would always come in and assume women generally wouldn't want higher ABV or stronger beers. Typically, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, women tend to drink higher ABV beer than most men, right?
Yeah, and hazy.
And so a lot of times people would come in, husband and wife come in, and he's like, my wife never had any craft beer before, give her something light and easy, and she wouldn't like it. It's like, she never likes craft beer, I don't know what's going on. And then we give her like 10% Saison, and she's like, I love this beer and it's amazing. And there's a lot of different trends between demographics, people, age, location, things like that. There's a lot of factors, but that's one that I always thought was pretty cool. And then it was the difference between a brown ale and a stout. All right, and it's weird. I generally answer these all the time, but Adam's organization actually regulates style, so I'm not gonna hear this later. But they're two different styles. They're both under. So all beers are ale or lager. The main difference between an ale and lager is the way they ferment. A lager ferments lower, so the yeast actually converts the sugar into CO2 and alcohol at the bottom of the tank. So I always remember lager lower, and then ales are top fermenting beers, so they're on top. So brown ale and stout are both, ales, but their grain bill starts off different. So a brown ale, brewed at Ale Works for a while, and one of our main beers was Tavern Brown Ale, and the grain bill has a wider variety to keep it from hitting a darker SRM. So SRM is how you track, essentially how the beer looks. So standard reference method. So stouts are generally darker. Brown ales a little more mellow. Locally, we have Legend Brown Ale, if you've ever seen that. In addition to that, a lot of stouts are very lightly hopped. A lot of brown ales do get, treatments. The one we did, AleWorks, we had 5 hop additions in it. Stouts, also have a lot of hop additions, but maybe not, wide variety. Maybe like, 1 or 2 in the beginning. Some of these pastry stouts, people just lie like they're actually putting things in. A lot of times, similar yeasts are used for both style, and the water profile is generally different too. So when we were talking about pH earlier, the darker grains you put into a beer lower the pH automatically. So if you're brewing a lighter beer like a Pilsner lager, when you're brewing it, a lot of people use acidulated malt, which actually lowers the pH. When you're brewing a darker beer, stout, brown ale, the more dark grains in it, and naturally will actually lower the pH. So in turn, changing the flavor. So there's a couple differences between brown ale and stout. I was actually surprised because I feel like every beer class people ask the difference between porter and stout. So at first I thought you said that, but it was brown ale. So that was nice to hear. Anything I miss on there, Adam?
No, I think you got it. I think brown ale, in the world of pairing, think of brown ale like a Pinot Noir. It can go all over the place. And then stout is going to have a little bit more use of that chocolate malt in there, and have a little bit more of that kind of more robust flavor. Good question. Yeah, brown ale.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in. So I want to give, yes, Adam.
So one of my neighbors is here, and they actually asked me to ask Adam a question. They want to know what you think the next trend will be here in America as far as hot varieties and styles and treatment to remarket your beer to make more money. Kidding.
Ooh, loaded question.
Yeah.
I think that for the palates here in the U.S., IPA and variants of IPA are still driving everything. And as people start playing around with more experimental hops and doing some things within there, I think we're going to see a couple new things come out. I don't know if I could say that there's a new style that's going to come out and emerge and kind of take over that, because the sheer difference between the world of IPAs and the popularity of IPA and then the next style down is so massive that you would have to see kind of a pretty big shift go there. I do think that you're going to see people paying a lot more attention to the calorie part of beer as well too, and you're starting to see some breweries pay attention to that, and that's something that's going to kind of catch on a trend for a little bit. Is it going to catch up to IPA? Probably
not. Thanks to your neighbor for that question. That was a good one. So we'll go ahead and wrap up since we're right about time. But I do want to say thank you so much to Adam and Bobby. The wealth of information that you have is just wonderful, and I know that we all really appreciate it. But want to thank all of our attendees also for joining us. I hope you'll continue to tune in for all of our upcoming programs. And remember to check out our Facebook, Instagram, and alumni website to stay up to date on what we have coming up next. And lastly, if you would like to host your own demo for your fellow alumni, please reach out and let us know. And we hope to see you soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and go Spiders.